I'm Louise Mason. For 3 years, I was the woman every girl in this city wanted to be. I was the wife of Andrew Daly. I trusted him with my sanity. I trusted him with my pulse. But trust is the most dangerous luxury you can own. Because what I discovered the night I tucked that pill under my tongue instead of swallowing it, it didn't just break my heart. It incinerated my entire reality. It turned every I love you into a weapon and every good night into a sentence. But before I show you what I recorded that night, before I tell you how I took down an empire, I need you to do something. Click that follow button and share this. I need the board of directors, the investors, and every woman who thinks she's safe in a golden cage to see this. Drop a comment with where you're watching from. I need to know I have witnesses. Because what Andrew and my own sister did to me, it's not just a scandal. It's a crime. Let me take you back to the start, to when the care began. Andrew and I met at a gala in Zurich. He was the king of Silicon Alley, the man who could encrypt any secret. Ironic, right? The man who built his fortune on security was the greatest threat to mine. He was charming, powerful, and my family adored him. My sister Sandra was my maid of honor. She cried at the wedding. Now I know those weren't tears of joy. They were tears of anticipation. 6 months ago, the brain fog started. Or at least, that's what Andrew told me I was feeling. The sun doesn't just shine on the Daly estate. It reflects off the floor-to-ceiling glass until the whole world feels like a polished diamond. I stood in my dressing room, the air smelling of Jo Malone peony and the sharp, metallic scent of hairspray. My reflection was perfect. A tailored Chanel suit in cream, hair swept back into a knot so tight it made my scalp ache, and a pair of Cartier studs that felt heavy against my lobes. I looked like a woman who had everything. I looked like the queen of a tech empire. But inside, my bones felt like they were made of wet sand. "Louise, darling, the car is downstairs." Andrew's voice drifted in, smooth as silk. I watched him in the mirror. He walked up behind me, his hands resting on my shoulders. His palms were warm, too warm. I felt a sudden flicker of nausea in my stomach, a cold ripple that didn't match the heat of his touch. He leaned down, pressing his lips to the junction of my neck and shoulder. "You look tired. Are those circles under your eyes again?" I blinked, trying to focus on the gold-framed mirror. My vision felt blurry at the edges, like looking through a lens smeared with grease. I didn't sleep well, Andrew. The fog is back. It's the stress of the gala," he whispered, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw. "You've been so forgetful lately, honey. Remember when you left the stove on yesterday? Or how you forgot your own sister was coming for brunch?" My heart gave a dull, sluggish thud. Did I? I searched my mind, but it was like reaching into a drawer and finding it empty. A cold sweat broke out at the base of my spine. I was 31 years old. I shouldn't be losing pieces of my day like dropped coins. "I don't remember the stove," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Exactly," Andrew said, his grip on my shoulders tightening just a fraction. "That's why we have the routine. To keep you safe, to keep you sharp." He turned me around. His eyes were a piercing, clinical blue, the color of a computer screen in a dark room. He looked at me with such intense, focused devotion that it felt like being pinned under a microscope. I felt a sudden, sharp pang of guilt. How could I doubt a man who spent his every waking hour worrying about my health? I followed him downstairs, my heels clicking hollowly on the marble. Each step felt like I was walking underwater. By the time we reached the foyer, where the light was brightest, I had to grab the mahogany banister to keep from swaying. My pulse was a slow, heavy drum in my ears. "Careful," Andrew said, catching my elbow. "See? You can barely stand. We'll get through the lunch with the investors, and then you're going straight to bed. I'll bring you your water. I'll take care of everything." I nodded, leaning into his strength, never noticing how his eyes flicked toward the guest wing where Sandra was staying. I was too busy trying to remember if I had ever really left the stove on at all. The clock on the nightstand clicked to 9 p.m. The sound was small, but in the silence of our bedroom, it felt like a gunshot. I was propped up against the silk pillows, the cool fabric of my La Perla slip clinging to my skin. The room was dim, lit only by the amber glow of the recessed lights, but the shadows in the corners felt heavy, like they were leaning in to watch. Then came the sound of his footsteps, methodical, even. Andrew appeared in the doorway holding a baccarat tumbler. The ice clinked against the glass, a bright, sharp sound that made my teeth ache. "Time for your medicine, Lou," he said. He didn't ask. He never asked. He sat on the edge of the mattress, the weight of his body shifting the bed, pulling me slightly toward him. He smelled of expensive sandalwood and the sterile scent of the office. He held out his palm. In the center sat the pill, a small, chalky white disc. It looked harmless. It looked like a grain of salt against his tanned skin. I feel a little better tonight, Andrew, I said, my voice coming out thin. Maybe I don't need it. My head feels almost clear. His expression didn't change, but his eyes darkened. He reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers were cold. You felt clear yesterday morning, too. And then you forgot where you parked the car at the mall. You called me crying, Louise. Remember? My stomach did a slow, sickening roll. I searched for the memory. I tried to see the parking lot, the rows of cars, the feeling of the steering wheel. Nothing. Just a gray, fuzzy blankness. The panic started as a prickle in my fingertips, a cold rush up my arms. I don't remember calling you, I whispered. That's the brain fog, honey. It's eating the edges of your life. He pressed the glass into my hand. The water was condensation cold, making my palm go numb. I talked to Dr. Eris. He said the dosage has to be consistent, unless you want the confusion to get worse. Unless you want to forget me. No, I said quickly. The thought of drifting away from my own life terrified me more than the drug did. No, I don't want that. Then take it. For me. He watched my throat. That was the part that always made my skin crawl, the way he never looked away until he saw the muscles of my neck move. I placed the pill on my tongue. It tasted bitter, a chemical burn that coated the back of my mouth. I took a long swallow of water. Good girl, he murmured. He leaned in and kissed my forehead. His lips felt like dry paper. Within 10 minutes, the world started to tilt. My limbs felt like they were being filled with lead, pulling me down into the mattress. The amber lights stretched into long, bleeding ribbons of gold. I tried to lift my hand to touch his face, but my fingers wouldn't move. My eyelids were shutters, being forced closed by invisible hands. As the blackness rushed in to swallow me, I heard the faint creak of the door opening. A second shadow joined his on the wall. A woman's shadow. Is she out? A voice whispered. It sounded like my sister Sandra. But I couldn't wake up to ask. I was already gone. The smell of Le Labo Santal 33 hit me before I even saw her. It was Sandra's signature scent, sharp, woody, and expensive. I stood in the foyer, my head still heavy from the morning's grogginess, watching the movers carry her Louis Vuitton trunks into the guest wing. It's just for a few weeks, Lou, Sandra said, gliding toward me. She looked radiant, her skin glowing with a health that made my own sallow complexion feel like a mask. She reached out and squeezed my hands. Her palms were damp. Andrew called me. He's so worried about your lapses. You need family around. I forced a smile, but my stomach felt tight, like a knot being pulled too hard. I'm fine, San. Really. It's just the fatigue. You're not fine. Andrew's voice boomed from the stairs. He descended, his silk tie loosened, looking every bit the relaxed billionaire. He didn't go to me. He walked straight to Sandra and took a heavy garment bag from her hand. The air in the room shifted. It was a subtle change, like the drop in pressure before a storm. I watched them. Andrew's hand lingered on the small of Sandra's back a second too long. It wasn't a brother-in-law's touch. It was possessive. My pulse quickened, a frantic tapping against my ribs. At dinner, the tension was thick enough to taste, metallic and sour. The dining table was a 20-foot slab of black walnut, usually a vast desert between Andrew and me. Tonight, Sandra sat to his right. This sea bass is incredible, Andrew, she murmured, her fork scraping the fine bone china. I had the chef prepare it specifically for your appetite, Andrew replied. He didn't look at his plate. He was watching Sandra eat, his eyes tracking every movement of her throat. What about my appetite? I asked. My voice sounded loud, brittle in the quiet room. Andrew finally looked at me. His face smoothed into that practiced mask of concern. You barely touched your greens, Louise. Your brain needs the nutrients. Don't get defensive. I looked down at my plate. The kale looked like crumpled velvet. I felt a hot flush of shame creep up my neck. Was I being paranoid? The fog made everything feel like a dream, making it impossible to trust my own gut. Then, Sandra reached for the salt. As she moved, the silk of her wrap dress pulled tight across her midsection. She looked fuller, not soft, firm. Andrew's gaze dropped to her stomach for a heartbeat, and his hand, resting on the table, flexed. A low, dull ache started behind my eyes. You two seem close, I said, the words tasting like copper. Sandra laughed, a light, tinkling sound that didn't reach her eyes. We're family, Lou. We're just focused on getting you back to yourself. Andrew stood up, the chair legs screeching against the marble. It's 9 p.m. Sandra, why don't you start unpacking? I need to get Louise her water. He didn't wait for an answer. He walked to the kitchen, leaving me alone with my sister. She didn't look at me. She just kept eating, her jaw moving in a slow, steady rhythm, while my heart hammered a warning I wasn't yet brave enough to hear. The morning air was cold. I stood in the walk-in closet, the rows of Andrew's Tom Ford suits hanging like a line of faceless men. My head felt like it was stuffed with cotton wool, a lingering gift from the 9 p.m. pill. I grabbed his charcoal blazer to move it toward the dry cleaning pile when I felt a hard, rectangular lump in the interior pocket. My fingers went numb. I pulled it out. It wasn't a business card or a stray receipt. It was a blister pack of vitamins. I held them up to the light filtering through the frosted glass window. My eyes struggled to focus on the tiny print. Prenatal 1. Folic acid and DHA. The blood drained from my face so fast I had to lean against the mahogany shelving. My heart started to race. A frantic, jagged rhythm that made my chest ache. I wasn't pregnant. Andrew and I hadn't even tried in over a year. He'd told me my condition was too unstable for a baby. He'd said a pregnancy would break me. I turned the pack over. One pill was missing. A sudden, sharp memory pierced through the haze. Sandra at breakfast, turning her nose up at the smell of the espresso machine. Sandra wearing that loose, flowing wrap dress. Sandra's hand resting, just for a second, on the curve of her belly while Andrew watched her with a hunger he never showed me. The silence of the house suddenly felt heavy, like it was pressing against my eardrums. I heard the muffled sound of laughter from the guest wing. Her laughter. It was bright and sharp, cutting through the sterile quiet of my prison. I shoved the vitamins into my own pocket, the plastic edges digging into my thigh. My palms were sweating, making the silk of my robe feel slimy. I walked to the vanity and sat down, staring at the woman in the mirror. Her eyes were sunken, her skin the color of old paper. Louise? I jumped. Andrew was standing in the doorway, his reflection looming behind mine. He was wearing his gym gear, a thin sheen of sweat on his forehead. He looked healthy. He looked powerful. What are you doing in here, Lou? You should be resting. You look pale. I forced my hands to stay still in my lap, hiding the bulge in my pocket. I was just looking for my blue scarf. He walked over and placed his hand on the back of my neck. His skin was hot. You don't have a blue scarf, honey. See? You're getting confused again. I looked at his reflection, the man I'd loved for 3 years, and for the first time, I didn't see a protector. I saw a predator. The confused wife was a role he had written for me, and I had been reciting my lines perfectly. Right, I whispered, my throat feeling like it was lined with glass. I must have forgotten. It's okay, he murmured, his thumb rubbing the base of my skull. That's why I'm here. To remember, for you. I felt a wave of pure, cold terror wash over me. He wasn't just drugging me to keep me quiet. He was replacing me. And the missing pill in that pocket meant the replacement was already growing inside my own sister. The clock on the nightstand ticked toward 9. I sat on the edge of the mattress, my feet pressing into the plush wool rug, feeling a cold shiver crawl up my arms despite the warmth of the room. This was the moment, the point of no return. I heard the familiar clink of the crystal carafe in the hallway. My stomach knotted into a tight, hard ball. I had practiced the move in the bathroom 10 times. The slight tilt of the head, the tongue flick, the deep swallow of water. It had to be perfect. Andrew walked in. He looked calm, his white dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He held out his hand. The white pill sat there like a tiny bleached bone. Drink it all, Lou, he said. His voice was a low hum, steady and demanding. You had a rough morning. You need the deep sleep. I took the pill. I felt the dry, chalky texture against the side of my cheek as I tucked it deep into the pocket of my gum line. I grabbed the glass. The water was ice cold. I took a massive gulp, making sure he saw the muscles in my throat work as I swallowed. I even let a little water drip down my chin for effect. Good, he whispered. He took the glass from my shaking hand and set it down. He waited. He always waited. I lay back, pulling the duvet up to my chin. I forced my breathing to slow down. I closed my eyes, counting the seconds. My heart was a trapped bird, battering against my ribs, but I kept my face slack, my jaw loose. I heard him move around the room, the rustle of his clothes, the click of the lamp. Then, the room went dark. Usually, the blackness would come from the inside. Tonight, I was wide awake in the shadows. 10 minutes passed. Then, 20. The silence in the house was heavy, broken only by the hum of the central air. My skin felt hypersensitive. Every itch, every stray hair on my face felt like a needle. I heard the bedroom door creak open. I didn't flinch. I kept my eyes shut, my breathing rhythmic and shallow. She's under, Andrew said. His voice wasn't soft anymore. It was sharp, practical. Are you sure? It was Sandra. Her voice came from the foot of the bed. I felt a surge of hot, raw adrenaline hit my bloodstream. I wanted to scream. I wanted to fly out of bed and tear the secrets out of her throat. Instead, I stayed frozen. I was a ghost in my own body. She took the whole dose, Andrew said. She'll be out for 8 hours. She wouldn't wake up if a bomb went off. I heard them move closer to each other. The scent of her Lalabo perfume drifted over me, thick and cloying. I realized then that my house wasn't a home. It was a stage, and for the first time, I was the only one in the audience who knew the ending. I kept my eyes shut, but my ears were wide open. The darkness behind my eyelids felt like a heavy curtain. The mattress shifted. Someone sat on the edge of the bed near my feet. The scent of Sandra's perfume, that sharp, woody sandalwood, clogged my nose. My heart was thumping so hard against the mattress, I was sure they could see the duvet moving. "Look at her," Sandra whispered. There was no pity in her voice, just a cold, flat observation. "She looks like a doll." "She's a liability," Andrew replied. His voice was closer now, right over my head. I felt the air move as he gestured. "The lawyers are already drafting the papers. 3 more weeks of documented episodes, and the board won't have a choice. I'll have full power of attorney. We'll move her to the facility in Vermont. It's quiet there. She'll have everything she needs to be, comfortable." "And the divorce?" Sandra asked. "There won't be a divorce. Not a messy one. An incompetent spouse can't fight a settlement. I'm not letting her lawyers touch the daily tech stock, Sandra. That money belongs to the heir." I felt a sudden, sharp chill wash over my skin. My stomach lurched. The word heir hung in the air like a thick, foul mist. "He's growing so fast, Andrew," Sandra murmured. I heard the soft rustle of fabric, the sound of her hand stroking her own stomach. "He's going to have your eyes. I can already tell. He's going to have everything," Andrew said. His tone was fierce, a side of him I'd never heard. The daily name, the company, everything Louise was too fragile to handle. "By the time she's declared unfit, you'll be in the guest wing officially, as her quote-quote caretaker. No one will question why the baby is here. And once she's gone, we become the family this house was built for." I wanted to scream. I wanted to sit up and rake my nails across their faces. The betrayal was a physical weight on my chest, making it hard to draw a shallow breath. My own sister, my own husband. They weren't just stealing my life. They were waiting for me to disappear so they could step into my shoes. "What if she remembers?" Sandra asked, her voice dropping to a low hiss. "What if the pills stop working?" "They won't," Andrew said. I heard him stand up. "I'm increasing the dose starting tomorrow. She won't remember her own name, let alone what we're saying. Come on, let's go check the nursery plans in the study." Their footsteps faded out of the room. The door clicked shut. I waited, my muscles locked in a rigid, painful cramp, until I was sure they were gone. Then, I spat the bitter, half-dissolved pill into my hand. It was slimy and disgusting. I sat up in the dark, my eyes burning with a rage so hot it felt like fire in my veins. They thought I was a doll. They thought I was a broken thing to be discarded. But I was still here. And I was finally, terrifyingly awake. The house was silent, but it wasn't empty. It was watching me. Every corner of this $30 million tomb was rigged with Andrew's proprietary Daily Shield sensors. I stood in the hallway, my bare feet cold against the marble, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my collarbone. I knew the cameras were there, little glass eyes hidden in the crown molding, but I also knew the one thing Andrew didn't think I remembered: his override code. I slipped into his home office. The air was chilled, smelling of expensive leather and the ozone of high-end servers. I sat in his ergonomic chair. It was too big for me, making me feel small, but I didn't let that stop me. My fingers shook as I reached for the hidden keypad beneath the mahogany desk. I punched in our wedding anniversary, the date he used for everything because he thought I was too foggy to notice the irony. The dual monitors flared to life, the blue light stinging my dry eyes. I didn't go for the bank accounts first. I went for the security logs. My stomach lurched as I pulled up the bedroom feed from 3 nights ago. I watched myself on the screen, lying limp and gray on the bed, while Andrew stood over me. On the high-definition footage, I saw him drop 2 pills into my water glass instead of 1. He stirred it with his pinky finger. He was smiling. A cold, oily sweat broke out on my forehead. I downloaded the clip to a secure cloud drive I'd set up minutes ago. "Keep it together, Louise," I whispered. My voice sounded like dry leaves. Next, I dug into the encrypted folders. Andrew was a tech genius, but he was also arrogant. He kept a digital ledger of his offshore diversions. I scrolled through rows of numbers, millions of dollars funneled into shell companies in the Cayman Islands. But it wasn't just corporate theft. I found a folder labeled SM Personal Care. I clicked it. My breath hitched. It was a private medical account. Prenatal visits, a nursery interior designer, and a legal retainer for a sanity hearing in my name. The dates lined up perfectly with when the brain fog started. He wasn't just drugging me. He was paying for my sister's pregnancy with the money from our joint estate. I plugged in a black USB drive I'd swiped from the supply room. The progress bar crawled across the screen. 10%, 40%, 80%. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. My blood turned to ice. I grabbed the mouse, my palm slick with sweat. I shut down the monitors just as the heavy office door began to swing open. I dove under the desk, my knees hitting the hard floor with a thud that felt like it shattered my bone. I pressed my hand over my mouth to stop the sound of my ragged breathing. The scent of sandalwood entered the room. Andrew. I saw his polished Oxford stop inches from my hiding spot. I stayed frozen, my pulse a deafening roar in my ears, praying the incompetent wife was the only version of me he expected to find. The ballroom of the Pierre Hotel was a sea of black ties and silk gowns. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and expensive champagne. I stood on the periphery, my fingers gripping a crystal flute so hard I thought it might shatter. My dress was a floor-length scarlet Valentino, a bold contrast to the sickly pastels Andrew usually made me wear. My stomach was a knot of cold wire, but my head, for the first time in months, was piercingly clear. "You look flushed, Louise," Andrew whispered, stepping up behind me. He leaned in, his hand heavy on my waist. "Are you sure you're up for this? We can leave after the tribute video." "I wouldn't miss this for the world," I said. My voice was steady, even as a drop of sweat rolled down my spine. Beside him stood Sandra, wearing a loose-fitting emerald gown that couldn't quite hide the softening of her waistline. She gave me a tight, pitying smile. "Just take it easy, Lou. We're right here if you get confused." The lights dimmed. The chatter of the city's elite died down to a respectful hum. On the massive 4K screen at the front of the room, the words "Daily Tech, a Legacy of Care" appeared in gold letters. "Ladies and gentlemen," Andrew said, stepping toward the podium with that practiced, billionaire charm. "Before we begin the auction, I want to share a glimpse into the heart of our mission." He signaled the tech booth. I looked up at the screen. The music started, a soft, hopeful piano track, but then it glitched. A sharp, digital screech tore through the speakers. The screen flickered, and the polished tribute video vanished. In its place, a grainy night vision feed from our bedroom appeared. The room went deathly silent. There was Andrew, standing over my sleeping body, dropping 2 white pills into a glass. Then came the audio, crisp and terrifyingly clear. "She's a liability," Andrew's voice boomed through the ballroom. 3 more weeks and I'll have full power of attorney." I watched Andrew. His face went from tan to a sickly, mottled gray. His hand froze on the podium. Then came Sandra's voice, echoing off the gilded ceiling. "He's growing so fast, Andrew. He's going to have your eyes." The camera on screen zoomed in on the prenatal vitamin pack Andrew had pulled from his pocket. Gasps ripped through the crowd. I felt the heat of 100 stares shifting from the screen to the stage. My sister's face crumpled, her hands flying to her mouth. Andrew turned toward the tech booth, screaming for them to shut it off, but I had already locked the system from my phone. "The fog is gone, Andrew," I said, my voice carrying into the stunned silence. I walked toward the podium, the heels of my Louboutins clicking like a countdown. I didn't look like a victim. I looked like the person who had just liquidated his offshore accounts and sent the login credentials to the SEC 10 minutes ago. "The board is waiting in the lounge," I told him, leaning into the microphone so the whole room could hear. "And the police are waiting in the lobby." The air in the daily boardroom was cold, tasting of ozone and expensive espresso. I sat at the head of the table, my hands resting on the polished obsidian surface. No tremors, no fog, just the steady, rhythmic beat of a heart that finally belonged to me again. Across from me, Andrew looked small. The charcoal suit that used to signal power now hung off his frame like a shroud. His wrists were bare. The authorities had taken his Patek Philippe along with his phone. 2 officers stood by the door, their heavy boots a dull contrast to the plush carpet. "The board has reached a decision, Andrew," I said. My voice was low, flat, and hard as a diamond. "You're out. Effective. Immediately. Morality clauses are a bitch, aren't they?" He tried to speak, but his throat clicked. He looked at the legal papers spread out between us, the divorce settlement that stripped him of the offshore accounts I'd already drained, and the deed to the glass house he'd tried to turn into my coffin. He'd signed them an hour ago in exchange for me not handing over the second set of files to the feds. I lied. The feds were already waiting in the hallway. "Louise, please," he croaked. "Sandra, she has nowhere to go. She's carrying my son." A sharp, hot spark of anger flared in my gut, but I pushed it down. I thought of Sandra, hiding in a cheap motel in Queens, shunned by every social circle we'd ever moved in. She was a ghost now, haunted by the very man she'd tried to steal. "She has exactly what you gave me," I said. "Nothing but her own shadow." I stood up. My legs felt strong. the wet sand heaviness of the drugs long gone. I walked past him, the scent of his expensive sandalwood cologne no longer making me dizzy. It just smelled like old lies. As the officers moved in to lead him away, the metal of the handcuffs snapped shut. A bright, final sound that echoed off the glass walls. I didn't look back. I had a press conference in 20 minutes to announce the Daily Foundation for Cognitive Justice. We were going to fund the lawyers and the doctors for the women whose husbands tried to erase them. I stepped out onto the balcony of the penthouse. The city stretched out below me, a grid of light and steel. The wind was sharp, biting at my cheeks, but I welcomed it. It felt real. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small white pill, the last one I'd saved. I opened my hand and let the wind take it. I watched it vanish into the dark. I wasn't just the billionaire's wife anymore. I was the one holding the keys to the empire. Thank you very much for watching. Comment below what you thought and what was the best or worst part. Don't forget to subscribe. Until next time.